Ashley says there are atheists in foxholes, even in the worst of times. And so I want to talk to Ashley about, exactly what she means by that. Ashley, you're with Jimmy and Ben. How are you? Hey.
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing great. We're doing great. We're having a great Sunday. We are honoring veterans and military members, and happy to hear your thoughts. So tell us, you say that there are atheists in foxholes, even in the worst of times. Can you expand?
Yeah, absolutely. I was raised in the United Church of Canada, which is a very liberal and progressive church. And so the church that I grew up in was always LGBTQ affirming. And I did have LGBTQ members in my family. So while my parents do believe in God, by teenage years, I didn't really. And by adulthood, I'd let it go completely. So I don't have really any hangups with religion, besides the harm it does to the rest of the world.
Okay. So you have no hangups with religion besides the harm that it does, but are you there?
So now I'm a registered nurse.
Okay. I wonder if you are cutting in and out. Yeah, Ashley, so I don't know if you can hear me right now. I'm going to return you to the queue for a moment. So you are no longer on with us, Ashley. If you're hearing this, you're having kind of a call problem. I can't really hear you, so I'm going to pick you back up. Ashley, you there?
Has this helped?
Hey, Ashley. Hey, you're back with Jimmy and Ben, and you were kind of cutting out a little bit. So I kind of wanted to see if we could restart the conversation. So you grew up in the the United Church of Canada, I believe you said, and it was a LGBTQ affirming church. You stopped believing by about teenage years, and now you're a registered nurse who had a near-death experience. That's what I got so far.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for your service as a first responder, and I'm super happy to hear that your family, even though they are religious, are open to LGBTQ members. I would like to know, though, how is it that you have come to relate all of these experiences to being an atheist in a foxhole?
Oh, because even in my own personal experience, when I was very near death, I was hemorrhaging and I was passing out. My blood pressure was 40/20, and I didn't know if they would be able to bring me back with blood transfusion. And even then, it went white. I blacked out. It was very similar to sleeping. It was not, I didn't see Jesus. I didn't see God, even though I had been indoctrinated with those ideologies as a child. And so that's my personal experience. And then working with other patients, I find the patients that do have a religion, they tend to have near-death experiences. They see their particular God or their particular ideology. And the ones that are atheists like me tend not to see anything, and it's just an experience.
All right. Well, I think this is a perfect segue over to Ben, because I think Ben would probably have a lot to say on a subject like this, being a medical professional himself.
Yeah, I mean, near-death experiences are always an interesting conversation to have. And I guess I'm curious, like, you said you've had some patients that have had NDEs as well. Have you had like kind of prolonged conversations with them about what they believe surrounding that? Or did they kind of describe what their experience was like?
With their loved ones, with their families afterwards.
Yeah, because I mean, it's an interesting thing that like you've had your own experience where you didn't believe you had a supernatural encounter in that. But I do know of some atheists that have called in to the show that were even like on the line of wanting to like convert back to religion based on an NDE that did have a kind of religious experience. And it's interesting that even if somebody is atheist, they might still go back to those experiences they had while in religion. So I'm a little bit curious, like, what was this specific experience that you had? Like, do you think you had, like, I guess when we're describing it as a near-death experience, like, there's usually something that you can perceive beyond, like, the actual event. Like, do you have anything that you think did happen during that time?
Like I said, the room went white and I passed out and went, like, it was like just falling asleep for me, really.
Okay. It's interesting that you've had
really
maybe
sad. I had young children.
Yeah, and I don't want you to have to go into detail that you don't.
Sorry, delay.
Yeah, I don't want you to have to go into more detail than you want to. Although I am a little bit curious about just kind of the context of this event and, like, a lot of that. But I know that this is kind of your private information as well, and you don't need to disclose any of that. But it is interesting.
No, Ben, I'm happy to talk about anything. You can ask me any question. Like I said, I'm a nurse. I believe in science. I'm also a woman who dealt with infertility and loss, so I'm very open to sharing my story to help other women and people, other families.
Yeah, I guess kind of what led to this near-death experience for you? Like, if you're okay talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my husband and I were hoping to grow our family, and we were trying for another baby, and because we had a miscarriage that resolved itself earlier that year, so I was pregnant again. We were excited, and then 12 weeks we found out no heartbeat. So then I thought, again, being I thought that a nurse, I thought I was an informed patient, and I decided to try and let it resolve itself yet again, and that didn't happen. And so then they gave me misoprostol to induce labor. And they did recommend, because it was such a prolonged miscarriage, to do it in the hospital. But I'm like, oh, no, I'll be fine. I'll go home. And within an hour of taking the medication, I was hemorrhaging very seriously. And so by the time I got to the hospital, I had lost enough blood that it was potentially a serious situation. And like I said, by the time I was blacking out in the hospital, my blood pressure was 40/20, and I didn't receive 2 units of blood.
Wow. How many weeks were you at that point?
The fetus had stopped growing at 10 weeks. We discovered that the heartbeat is stopped at 12 weeks, so this was now like 16 to 18 weeks where I had retained the fetal demise, as they call it in medical terms.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question for me. Like, maybe going more into cognitive bias. So you had this happen to you, and then decided you didn't want to use the medication right away. Kind of what stood in your way from going forward with the treatment right away as opposed to waiting?
Oh, yeah, I guess that would have probably, now I recognize it as residual religious or other indoctrinations. Not maybe religion, but, letting the body do things naturally. Birth is a physiological process, and my body should be able to resolve this naturally. I've already given birth naturally at once with a live baby. I've already had a resolved miscarriage. So, just really believing in that kind of toxic mindset that can be popular in mom groups.
Mm-hmm.
That, this is all physiological. Our bodies are made to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely something that we get caught up in. And so even though you may not have had like a super conservative upbringing, there are still some I guess not really religious, but just different cognitive biases and different kind of fallacies that are brought up in when people are talking to each other.
Yeah.
about medical treatment. And even as a medical professional, being caught in some of that same rhetoric, it's just telling that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what belief system you come from. You can still be caught up in logic like that. So I think it's helpful to hear stories like that,
and in
knowing
the moment when it was happening, I was really regretful. I was like, why didn't I just do the DNC initially or do the medication at the hospital? I mean, when I was on the line to 911 as we were driving to the hospital, I even said that to the lady on the call. Like, I regret all my decisions that have led me here.
So, Ashley, can you,
I did not
I guess,
God.
say, yeah, right. So exactly. So can you say, like, even, I guess what you're describing is kind of relative to what some atheists maybe feel when they are quote unquote in a foxhole, right? And so you could probably relate to people who think that it's over, but still don't kind of turn to a religious belief, and in that way, your experience is probably similar to theirs.
Yes. Well, and like Ben said, even when we are medical professionals, like I have colleagues that are convinced of ghosts. Even my mother-in-law, she worked in housekeeping in geriatrics. And so she believes, the rooms would go cold, or she felt she'd have coworkers that say that they were alone in a bathroom and something pushed them from behind, where I was like, I've never had any experience like that. I'm very strong in my evidence is very high. To prove that the supernatural even exists. So, I have coworkers that refuse to get vaccinated. I have coworkers that have free birth by themselves, which just, it's crazy. No matter what the ideology it is, it can lead people to believe some really scary things.
So, Ashley, did you happen to catch the introduction to the show that I gave, where I gave an account of my experience being in an enemy attack while deployed? Did you happen to catch when I said that I thought that I was going to die, and I had kind of internally just thought to myself, God, if this is real, either get me out of here or make this quick, right? And so, what do you think? I mean, what is your opinion on that? Do you think that maybe I became a theist for a split second, or what's your thoughts as far as me being an atheist in a foxhole?
No, I'd still be an atheist because before I got flustered with all my thoughts and calling in, that was my ultimate thought too, that even if we do cry out, it's because we've been given that information as young children when our brains are forming, that there might be something out there. And I think that we always still will wonder. And I don't think in your last moments, if you're like, hey, if you're real, now's the time to save me or prove to me you're real, I don't think that makes somebody an atheist.
Yeah, and I think that's my position. Why I was trying to entice people to call in and challenge me on that is because basically I, at that point, had no other place to turn, right? I had nothing to lose at that point, because in my mind, it was already lost. I was already on my way out. And so I just decided, look, if everything I've been told is true, if all of the reasons that I've been given throughout my time as an atheist for me being wrong are correct, then now's your time to prove it. If I really am wrong, right? Or if you really are real, help me out, or if I'm going to meet you, at least let me meet you in a way where I don't suffer. So, I would argue that doesn't in any way make me a theist. It just kind of gives this being or this group of beings an opportunity to kind of make me become a theist. And obviously that didn't happen. I did survive, but I have no reason to think that anything above humanity's level, any deity of any kind, helped me out of there. And in fact, it was a matter of months before we even left anyway. So I was still in those situations.
Right.
But yeah, I was kind of, I'm happy to hear you say that. And I think also I wanted to kind of posit this on you. So relating your experience as dealing with pregnancy and maybe almost losing your life, relating that to my experience in the military, I can tell you that my wife, when we had our son almost 2 years ago, she had to go into an emergency C-section. Her blood pressure dropped, the baby's blood pressure dropped, and or heart rate dropped, I should say. And we thought we were potentially going to lose one or both of them. And so they wheeled her out. They tried to flip her over in several positions. They finally wheeled her out of the emergency room, or excuse me, of the delivery room. And on our way to the operating room, she kind of just looked at me, and I gave her a look of confidence back. And I at that point wasn't reaching out to some kind of higher being. Instead, I felt very safe in that environment because I was in a military hospital being handled by a team of military officers and medical professionals, and it made me feel a great deal of pride for what I belong to. I'm part of this group of professionals from a large kind of collection of jobs and career fields. I was an intelligence analyst at the time. I was dealing with doctors and nurses of different backgrounds in the health profession. And I just took a kind of a step back and said, wow, this is just really awesome, because in the end, my son was born and my wife was saved, and we're a happy family today. And I didn't cry out to some higher being. And so you can take the times where maybe you would turn to a higher being, and then the times where you wouldn't turn to a higher being, and you can't tell the difference between who interfered or who didn't, right? Or what interfered and what didn't. All we have to rely on is the people around us, and which that's exactly what being in the military and being a veteran is about, and so I can kind of relate to you, and I think my wife, of course, could relate more to you in that respect than I can.
Well, that does strike a nerve with me. I feel I was comforted at the hospital because I knew, first of all, they were my colleagues, and I knew that if I was going to be saved, these were the people that were going to do it. And they did. I mean, obviously, I'm still around, and they were able to save my life. So I don't feel like I called out to any deity, because I knew that the people that were going to save my life were already in the room.
Right. And that's a point I wanted to expand on too. The fact that, like, it seems like in those emergency situations that reaching out to God is going to be the best thing to do, because obviously if God is the omni God and he's going to have the best intentions, the best way to solve everything, like, why wouldn't you want that? But thinking through all of the stories throughout Christianity and whatever other religion about all of the times that God did not intervene, that's not as reassuring, right? Because what if this is the case that God just decides, no, actually it's better if your kid dies than if you die. But imagine like praying to a God that you don't know what his answer is going to be. You don't know if he's going to save you or not. And thinking that that's a better answer than, being confident in the place that you are, like being at a hospital with the people that are going to try everything possible to keep you safe. And that is their one job is to do that. And they, even if they don't have the immediate answer, they're going to do everything possible to find that answer. Whereas God might just say, fuck it. Like, we don't need to go into this anymore. It's fine.
Absolutely.
There's a greater purpose to this. So it is interesting. And you do have a very high risk of complications in general, from childbirth. It's one of the most dangerous things that can happen. And oftentimes the more religious people are the ones wanting to have things like home births, which are incredibly dangerous. And I don't want to tell anybody not to go through their own wishes of how they want to have a delivery, but like, imagine if you needed that emergency C-section and you were at home with somebody that was not qualified to deliver your baby, especially not in that emergency kind of way. Like, there's also, I could go on a whole separate track of how ambiguous the term midwife is in the US, because there are certified,
as a Canadian, that is stunning to me.
There are certified nurse midwives that are actually trained. There are also lay midwives that are often very religiously based as well, that will perpetuate this idea of you need to do this as naturally as possible. Don't let science intervened. They just want to harm you and your baby. And people believe that. And then they have these home births, which are super, super dangerous.
And then the cases where the midwife doesn't go to the hospital with them when it goes wrong, and they just ship them off. Oh God, I just watched a court case out of Kansas.
I think,
with a lay midwife.
I think we're talking about the same.
Yep,
we're talking about the same court case. But anyway, either way, that's kind of a sidetrack off of people thinking that God is going to be the ultimate right answer, when if you really think about it, they're like, and even thinking back to something like, this is maybe more of a different spin on like Pascal's wager, where you think of like, no, I'm taking the chances of believing in a God that may or may not exist. But like, even if that God is true, are you actually taking a better position for yourself?
Your baby, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, what are the chances that God just, even if you're believing in the right God, that He's just not going to give a fuck about your situation? So that's, I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's getting a little bit morbid, but I don't know if Jimmy has any other thoughts before we wrap up this call. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, I don't, except to say that I really appreciate.
I can talk to you about this topic forever.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that there are a lot of parallels that could be drawn between professionals of the military and in the medical field. So I really appreciate your input and your ability to kind of get personal and tell us about your experience and relate that to the subject matter of the show. And I think this was a great call, Ashley. I hope that you will keep following us and keep calling.